scope of a namespace. In the previous two lessons, we had discussed about the namespaces and adding namespaces in the XML documents. Here we'll discuss about the scope of a namespace and a few XML schema namespaces. Let's start with the scope of a namespace. Well, look at this sample code. In this example, the default namespace is the unique ID for the default namespace preceded by the URI. All markup without a prefix comes from this namespace because there is no local name defined for it. However, within the sample tag element, another namespace is declared and associated with the new prefix. So, it makes easily possible to differentiate between two competing uses of the ID attribute that we defined here. Also, the second namespace, which is new, is responsible for the tag element. This is made explicit by the prefix. To make it more clear, look at another example. In this example, both namespaces are declared to be document-wide and both used a prefix. All markups carry a prefix that explicitly associates it with the appropriate namespace. This clearly shows how multiple namespaces can have the same scope, simply by using local names for them. The scope in which a namespace applies is determined simply by where it is declared in the XML data. The general rule is that the namespace applies to the element where it is declared with the XMLNS attribute, and all child elements of that element. So by declaring a namespace in the root element, the scope of the namespace is the entire set of XML data. So I hope you are now clear with the scope of a namespace. Next, we'll discuss about XML schema namespaces. Generally, XML schema defines three namespaces for use in our schemas. Here they are: www.w3.org/2001/XML schema. The primary namespace defined by the specification. It defines the entire schema, simple type, complex type, and other elements used. The conventional namespace prefix is XS:, although you can always use your own prefix in a schema document. http://w3.org/2001/XML schema-datatypes. The XML schema datatypes namespace defines all the built-in datatypes of XML schema. This namespace is built into the XML schema namespace, so we don't normally need to reference this one. It is a standalone namespace so that other XML specifications can use the datatypes. http://www.w3.org/2001/XML schema-instance. The XML schema instance namespace, and we have used this to identify a schema that is used to validate a document outside of a namespace. It defines attributes that are used in instance documents. The conventional prefix is XSI:. For the past few minutes, we had discussed about the scope of a namespace and a few XML schema namespaces. Let's move on to the next lesson.